Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today around how to monitor and troubleshoot remote user experiences. By ways of introduction, my name is Stacy Leidwinger, and I am the leader of marketing here at Goliath Technologies. And with me, you have Yemi Ladyju, who's our senior technical consultant. Before we dive in, I just want to go through some housekeeping. First, in terms of flow today, we'll talk a little bit about the challenges that probably many of you are on the phone are experiencing as you try to isolate root cause of slow logon, slow session performance, dropping session applications. And then we're going to identify what are the criteria as you evaluate solutions to overcome these challenges, and how can you leverage data and analytics in order to have real insights into the performance and productivity of your remote workers. Please throughout submit your questions. We'll look at them throughout, and if not, we will absolutely get to them at the end. So please put any questions you have in the Q&A box. And one question we always get is, will there be a recording? Yes, within the next 24 hours, you will get a link to the recording of this webinar that you can either go back to or share with some of your colleagues. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. First, I'm sure many of you are facing a lot of these challenges that you see on this site. These are things that we've been hearing from our clients time and time again, especially with the surge of remote workers. At the heart of all these challenges really tends to be the lack of data and information in order to identify performance issues across your remote worker base. When you don't have visibility into what's occurring, it makes it really hard to isolate root causes of performance issues. It leads to poor communication across not only your teams that may be managing Citrix or VMware Horizon, but with your counterparts, like the network team, the storage team, with management, with your application vendors, with end users themselves. And one of the biggest challenges is it's becoming really hard to predict, are your remote workers having a good experience? Because you only get what end users are willing to share. And often that information is very subjective. It's often delayed in getting to you. And in maybe worst case, there's such an apathy that has set in and low expectation that you don't even hear anything from your end users until you're maybe in a meeting with management or send out a survey. And all of a sudden, some of these negative responses come back and you are completely unaware, unable to proactively respond to those issues. Now, why do these challenges exist? There's really kind of three core reasons in terms of how these challenges manifest themselves. First is the inherent complexity of the delivery infrastructure that delivers that end user experience across the Citrix or VMware Horizon environment. I'm going to go into details on that in a minute. The second, and this is great for many of you other than you might be overworked, but there's a true shortage of Citrix and VMware Horizon experts. In many instances, I talk to organizations and I ask who's leading their Citrix initiative. It's someone with a very strong Microsoft and Windows background, but desperately trying to get up to speed on Citrix. And the final piece is there's a lot of lack of software that is purpose-built to help assist you in monitoring and troubleshooting that end user experience. So let's talk about the complexity. Many of you on this phone probably understand the complexity, but I love this slide and we're happy to share it with you so that you can talk to your management and other IT teams around why it's so hard to isolate root cause when issues do arise. The challenge is in order to deliver that end user experience, you need to pull almost 15 different technologies together, have them work in concert, be flawless in order to get a good logon time. So let's talk about the users. Your users themselves are all unique. They have unique endpoints. They have unique environments, especially now that they're remote. Everyone has a different network, different bandwidth, and they have different ways of working. Some people like to stream audio in the background. Maybe they have a Netflix movie running as they're working. Others might have less CPU power on their endpoint. So already, before you even initiate anything in your data center, you have this unique environment that you need to be able to understand and get data from in order to isolate root cause when issues occur. Now, when you go into the data center, where you might have a little more visibility, but you often don't have visibility across all aspects. So if you're in a Citrix environment, for example, you have NetScaler, your storefront services, your delivery services, your desktops and applications. If you're in healthcare, you have your EHR applications that you're working with, a Cerner, an Epic, a Meditech, an Allscripts. Maybe you're in manufacturing and you're working in your ERP system. Behind there, you've got your back-end systems, from your licensing server to your SQL database to Active Directory. Below that, you have your hypervisor host layer. And sometimes I see many organizations that even have different hypervisors from different vendors that they're all working together. Then to even add more complexity, often, and maybe some of you have this, part of that infrastructure is on-premise and part of it's in a cloud environment, Azure, AWS. So whenever a problem arises and your remote worker says, my session is slow, it could be any one of these elements. And if you don't have end-to-end visibility, it's really hard to go ahead and identify that, yes, your session is slow, and it's because of a bad driver map inside one of your GPOs that's associated with Active Directory. This is why responding to those issues are so difficult. The second reason really comes down to a lack of expertise. And so these numbers that we show, we actually developed this with Citrix, and we actually have an infographic we can provide to you. But what we found is on average for a Citrix customer, and there's 400,000 of them, the average company needs about 2 to 3 experts in order to support that environment. I would argue this even goes up now that we have such an enlarged remote workforce, and you've probably deployed even more licenses across that remote workforce. But in general, let's say the demand out there globally is about 1.2 million experts. When we look at the supply of experts, it's drastically low. You take all the certification levels that are out there, and we estimated with Citrix that you've got under 60,000 experts. And so even in your own environment, you may be the only one or only 2 people trying to support this new way of working, all these new variables. You have people using Zoom and Teams that are requiring more bandwidth. And now you don't have enough resources to keep up. And then this is finally magnified by the third reason, which is you don't have purpose-built software with embedded intelligence and automation to help. What does that mean? It means all of this troubleshooting effort is manual. We talked to George Spears. He's a certified technical professional on Citrix, as well as across Epic certification. And he says that he spends anywhere from 25 to 30% of his time troubleshooting basic end user issues. Anytime the help desk gets an issue and someone says Citrix, Flow log on, they're immediately passing it on to him. And so he can't look at the more strategic initiatives. If there was purpose-built software that could take that workload off, he'd be able to go ahead and invest the time to ensure that he has the right infrastructure in place to deliver that great user experience. So when you look at these challenges, the question really becomes, how do I overcome them? You're probably saying, I know the challenges, Stacey, but what's the solution? The solution is really to have purpose-built technology with embedded intelligence and automation. What that means is take where most of your end user tickets and complaints come from. They're probably in 3 categories. That's what we find: log on initiation, log on duration, and session performance. You need technology that will automatically discover your entire Citrix or Horizon environment, identify which elements, conditions, and failure points to monitor, identify the thresholds that indicate poor behavior, and then alert on when those thresholds are exceeded. You build that intelligence into an application, you can transform your entire IT organization overnight from being reactive to proactive. And in fact, that is what Goliath technology does. So if we go to this next slide, you're going to see a sample of the customers and organizations that have invested in Goliath. You can see that we have scaled to some of the largest environments. We also have an ease of use and price profile that allows us to scale down to small and medium-sized organizations. Every one of these people on the screen come back to us and says, operationally, after investing in Goliath, it has the operational impact of hiring 2 to 3 full-time troubleshooting experts, whether it be Citrix or VMware Horizon. That's how they justify the cost. Reality is we've helped them transform from reactive to proactive so that they can anticipate, troubleshoot, and document those end user experiences. You might have also seen there where we have a focus on healthcare. We have purpose-built modules and business relationships with all the major EHR vendors, Epic, Cerner, Meditech, Allscripts, which allows us to give visibility not only in that end user behavior element we talked about, plus the underlying infrastructure in the data center, but all the way to the usability and performance of those EHR applications. That is why we are the standard in health IT. So now where I want to transition to, that we've talked about the challenges and solutions, is as you look for purpose-built software, what are the criteria elements? And we really fall into 3 buckets. How do you anticipate problems before end users are impacted so you can resolve them? No matter how much you anticipate, something will always go wrong. So how do you troubleshoot? How do you isolate and resolve quickly, not only as a Citrix expert, but even a help desk admin? And finally, how do you document that end user experience? Document that issues have been resolved, and how do you leverage data to see trends over time and, again, prevent issues from occurring? So we're going to break down each of these criteria, walk through a use case, as well as demo the software. And as we do that, you're going to see different elements across anticipate, troubleshoot, and document. You're going to see how we can offer threshold-based alerting, dynamic discovery of your environment, understanding if applications are even available across your remote locations. We'll show you real-time session display so you can troubleshoot slow performance, slow logon. And then finally, we're going to show how you can share, integrate, and enhance data in order to prevent these issues in the future. When you invest in a technology that does these three things, we guarantee that you will transform from reactive to proactive. So criteria number one around anticipate. What does it really mean to anticipate issues? It means that you have that embedded intelligence and automation already available so that the solution knows what to alert on, what thresholds are to be set so that you know when there's issues, and then how do you send those alerts, whether it be email or via text messaging. You also need to be able to test availability, right, and performance across remote locations. We work with a lot of hospitals that have, or health systems that have multiple hospitals. You can't be in each location testing performance. You need to be able to do that automatically with intelligence so that you know if there's an issue. And then you need to be able to report on all of this so that you can address issues before end users are impacted. So let's jump into a user story. I mentioned, one of the use cases is remote locations. So one of our customers is a top U.S. airline, and they came to us because they were having experience of slowness in their reservation system. And in some cases, there was even outages. And they have reservation specialists scattered throughout the United States, as well as in Europe. They needed to be proactively alerted anytime that reservation system, which was Sabre, being delivered through Citrix, was slow or not available. The other key aspect here is they did not want any software deployed on premises. Everything had to be cloud-based. And so what we were able to do is proactively set up alerts, leveraging their environment, and go out and from specific locations in the cloud on the East Coast, the West Coast, Midwest, Europe, we are able to go ahead and launch to their data center and identify, is their reservation system available? Is their Citrix system available? Is there slowness? If slowness or outages were found, it immediately brought an alert back. These tests ran continuously throughout the day, so they would know as IT professionals if an issue occurred before the end user reported it. Yemi, do you want to jump into what the deployment looked like and then finally show the technology?
Absolutely. Yeah, so before we go into the technology, I think it's important to set the stage a little bit and sort of expand on what Stacy just explained. So if we look on the slide here, this is the actual customer deployment diagram for this technology. And you can see that at the bottom of the screen, you have these application launchers that are deployed in different regions in AWS. And from these different locations, the Sabre application is being tested. So the technology is going to log on the same way an end user would, go through the NetScaler or storefront page, and ultimately make sure that there is a successful presentation of that application. So to give you some perspective as to what's actually taking place from these different sort of application launch locations, I have a quick video that sort of illustrates or walks through exactly what's happening at that particular location. So from, let's say, for instance, AWS West, the technology is going to open up a web browser to the NetScaler storefront page, able to accept any security statements, kind of the same way an end user would. It's able to confirm that the storefront page loads after it's logged in. It can navigate the storefront page depending on what you actually have configured. And then from there, we'll start launching these applications and desktops on a scheduled basis. So it's going to launch an application, make sure that it successfully presents, then it's going to log out and then sort of launch another application This can be configured to launch as many as you want. Of course, you don't have to sit here and watch it happen. It's all running in the background. So if there's an issue with any step of the process that causes the user not to be able to access these applications, then IT now gets a real-time alert, and they now have the ability to sort of analyze each one of these launches from this portion of the technology here, which is the Application Availability Analysis tab. And this page is really broken down into two sections. You have the top section that is going to give you a high-level dashboard of all of the launches taking place across the entire environment. This is where, this particular airline would be able to see sort of at a high level what availability looks like. Are we having longer log-on times for specific log-ons? You can see the blue bars will represent the launch times. And the trend line is overall availability. So now this is our lab environment, so we do have some simulated failures here. But of course, you would like to see that at about 100%. And if it's not, you get a real-time alert. And then you could sort of analyze each one of these individual launches at the bottom of the screen. So now you can see the date and time of the launches. You can see what application or desktop was being launched at this particular location. You see the locations, of course, and ultimately whether the launch was successful or if it failed. And you can sort of scroll down, you can see these historically. But of course, if it did fail, you can actually see exactly at what stage it failed. And then take it further by clicking here on this magnifying glass icon, where you can now see screenshots of each step of the process. So basically everything that application launcher went through in this particular launch use case, you'll be able to see. So in this case, you can see it fails at the enumeration stage, meaning that whatever application was supposed to be launched was not available on the storefront page. Now, this could be a Citrix configuration issue. This could be an issue with maybe your database going down, so localhost cache is being used. A lot of different factors can impact this. However, the net is the users will not have access to the applications, which effectively means they won't be able to do their jobs. IT now gets a real-time alert, and they're able to sort of get ahead of these and then get the details in the screenshots so that they're not relying on users to report exactly what they're seeing on the screen. So not only is it an early warning sort of system, but it's also a way of eliminating the subjective feedback or sort of subjective information that you're going to be getting from users when issues like this occur. So that's sort of the first portion of the technology that is very heavily used in the ability to anticipate issues before users are impacted. Another sort of proactive portion of the technology that leverages our embedded intelligence and deep Citrix and VMware integration is our automatic discovery and dependency map view. And this view is going to, as sort of the name implies, automatically discover all of those components that contribute to Citrix, in this case, in your environment. It'll automatically sort of map them out and then add over 250 monitoring rules to the environment. These are going to be monitoring for conditions, failure points, thresholds, events that actually can cause an end user experience issue in your sort of delivery infrastructure. And these are intelligent alerts that are applied to components based on their role in the environment. So as you can see here on the screen, you see the NetScalers, the storefront servers, delivery controllers, and any supporting servers in the infrastructure. So here's where you would see your licensing servers, your PBS servers, your hypervisor connections, SQL database. And again, all of them have these monitoring rules applied to them. So as I click on a particular component on the right-hand side of the screen, I can now see, resource utilization at the top of the screen here, context-specific health checks based on the role of the component in the environment. And then at the bottom of the screen here, any alerts that are sort of triggering off. So here's where I would be able to quickly identify things like connection failures due to not having enough machines in a machine catalog, or XML failures, and and all of those different myriad of things that can cause end user experience issues if they're not sort of taken care of. Other portions of this technology, of course, because of that sort of heat map structure, this is heavily used as a sort of knock view. So it has the embedded intelligence to understand the environment and send the alerts, but then it's going to sort of graphically display where those issues are taking place in a view that allows you to figure out exactly where components or where problems could be occurring in your infrastructure. We can also take it further into the delivery layer where you're able to see your delivery controllers map back to your delivery groups. So now it's more of a logical breakdown, and you're able to see the machine catalogs, gold images, if those are available, and then leveraging the embedded intelligence as well, you're able to click down on a particular delivery group and get a built-out machine infrastructure view that allows you to tie back user experience metrics, as you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, tie these back to the individual components that are available or contributing to the individual user sessions. So your delivery groups, machine catalogs, hypervisor clusters, and even individual hypervisor hosts. So you can then leverage the embedded intelligence and the knock capabilities to see exactly what could be driving end user performance issues from this view as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Stacy, and we can talk about the next criteria, which is troubleshooting.
Great. Thank you, Yemi. So as we talk about troubleshooting, it really, as much as we try to prevent and anticipate issues as we just talked through, we know issues are going to happen, especially now with such a large remote workforce and that variability. And so when it comes to troubleshooting, it's critical that you get real-time information that can identify if root cause of an issue is with the end user and their behavior or their endpoint, their connection, or is it back in the data center because perhaps there's not enough memory or CPU on a specific server or your hypervisor host, or is there something wrong with your Citrix receiver that's impacting that end user? And by getting this information and correlating the data so you can draw conclusions, it not only allows you, a Citrix expert, to resolve issues more quickly, but we also have found that in many of our organizations, the help desk can take this data because it's a step-by-step process, and Yemi's going to show it to you, that really allows them to have more insights and quickly identify, is it a behavior of the end user? Then they can talk to the end user about potentially changing. Or is it an issue with storage? They can talk to the storage team and route that question more quickly. We've seen a lot of avoidance from the Citrix experts and ticket avoidance because of the detail that we can provide. So let's go into another use case. So here we're going to talk about Penn National Insurance. They actually came to us before the entire COVID pandemic hit. This was late last year, and they had a virtual workstation initiative that they were running where they were going to have more and more of their employees start working remote. But in order to work remote, they needed to ensure that they had successful experiences while working from home. They had to be readily available, it had to be high performing, and it had to work not only in their home office, but if they were also on the road. One of the challenges they found, though, is the Cisco soft phone calls kept dropping. And there was a lot of finger pointing. Is it because of the application? Is it because of Citrix not working? There were so many user complaints that it almost ended the project and put everything on hold. What we were able to do is come in and provide information, data, to isolate root cause. And what they found out, it had nothing to do with the soft phone environment. And what it did have to do was with the amount of Wi-Fi bandwidth available, because the soft phones required a fair amount of bandwidth. And they were finding that many of these home workers, while they had great ISP, they were still competing for bandwidth. Yemi, do you want to talk a little bit more on the technology and how they can first see data and then how they'd be able to go ahead and troubleshoot something similar to Penn National?
Absolutely. Yeah, let's jump right into the technology because, when we're talking about troubleshooting, user experience issues and specifically within a session, our customers will head over to this view here. This is the Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop session display, and this is where all of the sessions in the environment will populate. Here's where you would see the users on the right-hand side of the screen, on the left-hand side of the screen. You can also you're also able to see, of course, the session state, IP address, receiver version, a lot of information about, what exactly is entailing or what exactly is going into that user experience at a high level here. Now, of course, we have the ability to move tabs around if you would like. You can sort of sort or filter based on any one of the tabs here, ultimately so that you can quickly identify the sessions that you're looking to troubleshoot. There's also a quick filter here that allows you to search for anything in text on the screen. So if I'm looking for a particular delivery controllers because I wanted to correlate user experience or log on times, as far as based on delivery controllers, or if I wanted to see all the receiver versions and if any one of those are having sort of issues with connectivity or ICA latency, I can quickly identify the sessions that I'm looking for. I can also pull back sessions historically. So we actually don't roll up or average any information that we collect in our technology. And what that means is you as sort of someone in IT has the ability to go back historically and take a look at a session from 2 months ago or 3 months ago, depending on how long you want to keep the data for, and get the same amount of granularity as you would from a session from today or an active session, which allows you to then understand what has changed in the environment that may be causing an issue today that might not have caused an issue in previous sessions or in the past. But without any sort of further commentary on this page, let's actually drill into an individual session. So as I click on a session, let's say, this user is complaining about slowness. As I click on a session, I now get a pop-up of about 7 tabs that breaks down everything that went into the user session, starting off with the summary tab, which really is almost like a roll-up of all of the different tabs that are available here. So there's a dedicated log-on duration tab. There's a dedicated tab for the ICA connection, dedicated tab for the server in your data center that's supporting a session, the hypervisor host. You can see the processes and applications down to events, alerts, and event logs that took place during the time frame of this user session. And it's set up in a way that by the time you've traversed through this page, you can come up with an answer as to why this user was having some sort of issue in their session. So if we take Penn National here, users were complaining about slowness and issues like that. So right away from the summary tab, they can, once they've clicked on a session, of course, take a look at the round trip time and understand, is this user actually having a problem or not? Now, if round trip time is above 450 milliseconds, then we know it's sort of a problem. If it's sustained over 450 milliseconds, then that's indicative of freezes and things like that that could impact or seriously impact the user experience there. So that's one that's very sort of a common metric. But the next 2 metrics are really, really important and pivotal metrics in understanding why slowness is taking place. So if we look here at network latency, this is sort of the network performance or the network performance for this particular user session. And this isn't the typical ping-based or ICMP-based network latency. This is network latency that we're getting from the ICA protocol itself as it is measuring this in order to decide on how to deliver a better experience to the user. What that means is we can tell definitively at what point the network latency inside that session was poor and how that impacted the user session. So from there, let's say, for instance, you can see high network latency. Then we can look at the bottom metric here, connection speed. This is the amount of bandwidth that is available for receiver or the workspace app at the user's location. So Stacy mentioned this earlier with Penn National. What they found was that when users logged in or users connected in from their home offices, they were seeing really poor connection speeds, really poor Wi-Fi bandwidth at their locations. And they were able to quickly make those correlations and say, well, it looks like poor network connectivity at your home location, and that the network connectivity dropped at about this time, and that correlates directly with a spike in network latency in your session, and ultimately a spike in round trip time and ICA latency, meaning that your poor connectivity is actually the root cause of your slowness rather than something in the delivery infrastructure or the hypervisor infrastructure, so on and so forth. And that's just by looking here at the summary tab. So as Stacy mentioned, this is heavily used by help desk and service desk because they don't even have to drill into any of the other tabs to make these sort of conclusions. So help desk can now look at these three metrics and route accordingly. If network latency is high and that's due to connection speed, then they decide to have a conversation with the end user. If network latency is low, but it's still impacting round trip time and maybe VM resources are high, then you can sort of route this over to the infrastructure team or the storage team, depending on what metrics that is, so that the core Citrix admins can have their time to work on some of the initiatives or innovations in the IT environment. Of course, there are other tabs here. For instance, the ICA HDX channel tab that allows you to drill further into the user session, right? So looking at ICA latency, network latency, and round trip time on the same chart, connection speed, input and output on one chart as well. But we can look here at this ICA channel usage breakdown because this is going to break down all of the channels that are being used inside of a user session. And it breaks down not only that, but the amount of bandwidth that is used at any particular time inside of this user session. So you can see here at the bottom of the screen, we have clipboard bandwidth. You have output thin wire bandwidth, which is a Citrix display adapter. What this allows us to do is tell at what points in a user session that this user was having slowness, and was that due to a specific type of bandwidth. For instance, with Penn National, they saw that a lot of users, when they had a regular session, poor Wi-Fi was able to support that, right? Because they're just going through a standard desktop session. But whenever they saw audio bandwidth being used, which is indicative of that insurance broker leveraging their soft phone inside of their session, as soon as they saw those spikes, those correlated directly with spikes in network latency and poor performance. So that allowed them to say, hey, you do have enough bandwidth to support a regular session, but if you're going to be using your soft phone inside of your session, then you probably want to get closer to your router, or you probably want to try to connect directly into the modem, or you probably want to kick everyone else off the Wi-Fi so you have enough bandwidth to support that. Now, of course, this is our lab environment, so there's really not much going on here as far as latency, but Penn National actually sent us a screenshot that I wanted to share with you guys because this really gives you an idea as to how this is used to quickly identify, the root cause of slowness or issues. So this particular user was having poor session, and that's indicative of the network latency, round trip time, and ICA latency being high, well above the threshold here at the top left-hand side of the screen. And you can see that that directly correlates with a drop in connection speed here at that user's location. And this was at about 3 p.m. So they asked the user, hey, what happened at this point? It turns out that her kids got on the Xbox and her spouse also got back from work and he got on the internet as well. And that completely crushed the amount of bandwidth that she had to actually have a productive session. And I wanted to point out finally before I pass it back to Stacy for the third criteria, that a lot of these metrics that we just shown here for Citrix is available. These metrics are, available for VMware Horizon as well, and we present them in similar screens as you can see with this screenshot here. So with that, I'll pass it over to Stacy to talk about the final criteria.
Great, thank you, Yemi. And as we jump into the final criteria, I have to admit, in talking with organizations that run Citrix or VMware Horizon for many years now, even beyond my time at Goliath, this is the element that people miss the most, but is most critical in driving success around delivering an exceptional end user experience. And it's all around the documentation of data and what that end user experience truly is. One of the challenges, and I don't care where you're at in IT, is so much of the information that you have to go on is often relied on hunches, gut feel, and again, what I mentioned earlier, really, opinions from your end users, and you don't have enough data to back it up. And so the third criteria, when you're looking to effectively troubleshoot and monitor that end user experience, it comes down to the data. And you need data that is going to understand or help you understand what's really going on in the end user experience. How is their environment, and what does it look like to them at any point in time? You need to be able to then take that information and share it, right? You need to be able to share it via email, print. You need to be able to export it through PDF, Excel, CSV files to manipulate or even integrate with other data. And when you integrate with other data, you need to be able to integrate into other individual workflows. Yemi and I both spent a little bit of time talking about the help desk. You need to take the information you have and make sure that it integrates into your IT service management or ticketing systems like a ServiceNow or B&C Remedy. You need to make sure that information then can be reached out into your event management, whether it be SCOM or Splunk. And then finally, you need to have out-of-the-box reports that you can leverage and configure to fit your environment. It's not good enough just to have a data dump, right? You need to have that information, and you need it organized in a way that allows it to make sense to you as well as other IT counterparts, your management team, application vendors, or even end users themselves. And you need to be able to see that data both in its raw format, but also leveraging third-party tools like a Power BI or Tableau so that you can visualize trends and take actions on that information. When you get true end-to-end visibility and data from the end user endpoint all the way through the data center and even into the applications, specifically if you're healthcare, those EHR applications, that's when you can really drive a difference in your organization. And you need that data to be available real time as well as historically, and not rolled up or averaged. You need to be able to go back 90, 180 days and see what Pam Gruber's log on time was, because sometimes you get questions around why has Pam had such an issue for the last 6 months? Has she really had an issue, or has it been spotty? It's only with data that you can answer those questions. Yemi, do you want to talk about the kind of data that's important and then even show some examples of reports?
Absolutely. Yeah, and as you can see here on the screen, when we're talking about data, there is a ton of information that we collect, and we sort of categorize them here under end user experience, end user activity, as well as, of course, your system performance. So we'll go through some of these here, but I think it's important to point out and talk to why some of these are important. For instance, the end user experience reports that, as Stacy mentioned, gives you an understanding of everything that goes into their experience: log-on duration, latency, connection speed. We also want to understand, especially now when users are working from home, we want to understand the users, when they are accessing the environment, how they are accessing the environment. So not only just to, of course, micromanage and things like that, but more importantly, so IT has an understanding of how these users are working and how they can best, moving forward, support them as efficiently as possible. And of course, all of these components that are available or that are being leveraged to deliver a user experience, it is important to understand and trend and track performance over time so that you can make some decisions based on the information that is gathered. So let's walk through some of our sort of most popular reports, starting with a holistic report on end user experience. This is going to break down their latency metrics, their log-on times, whether it's a fast or slow time. It's also going to break down their connection speed. So not only, is it breaking down, are they having a good experience inside of their sessions, or it's also breaking down if that is being driven by poor connectivity from that user's location. And then, of course, we have other reports that break down log-on duration on a deeper level, ICA latency on a deeper level. That's going to break down, of course, network latency, as well as the connection speed, and those metrics or those reports as well. Here's a log-on duration report. We collect a lot of good and deep information when it comes to the log-on process. And our reports also just break that down here, giving you the ability to not only see their overall log-on time, but the different sections in those log-on times, so that IT has an idea of what areas to focus on or to tackle next while they are trying to improve the log-ons and user experience in the environment. The next one is a very sort of extremely popular report, which is our end user productivity report. And this report is going to break down their Citrix users, how they're connecting into the environment, their IP addresses, but more specifically, it's going to show you the duration of their sessions, how much time inside of their sessions that they are actually creating ICA traffic, and conversely, the time that they are inactive inside of their session gives you an interaction percentage, as well as a max inactivity time, which effectively is the maximum amount of concurrent time that they were inactive inside of their session. This report can be run in our technology, and it can be sent out, to different business line managers, can be sent to sort of IT, so that you can understand, are users working, but also when are they working, how are they working, and how can we support them? And if, let's say, they aren't working, is it due to network configuration issues, poor performance, slow logons, and things like that? So these are sort of the out-of-the-box reports. But as Stacy mentioned, our technology can be exported and leveraged with other sort of reporting tools that are available in your IT organization as well. So here's a couple examples of reports that we have sort of worked with our customers to create leveraging Power BI. Here's one that breaks down logon times per application, but also giving you an idea of the session count, but also keeping that granular detail of the different stages of the process for these different applications as well. So you can track these over time, trend them over time based on the different servers, the different applications, and time of day as well. Here's another one that breaks it down, giving you that same detail, but more in a sort of on a longer time period where you can take a look at things like max logon time or average logon times for the different stages as well. And you can create these and manipulate them in ways that can be sent out to management that is sort of more graphically pleasing, so that, again, you can make those decisions leveraging the actual data that is being collected. And then, of course, we have reports for VMware Horizon as well. Here's a logon duration report for VMware Horizon, again, giving you that same amount of detail into the different stages, tracked and trended over time. So with that, I'll pass it over to Stacy, and we could wrap up.
Great. Thank you, Yemi. And we did have a few questions come in throughout. If you have questions, please submit them in the Q&A box, and we'll get to them here in a minute. One question that often comes up is, while this all sounds great, how long does it take to get up and running? We can get you up and running, and we've done this for many of our clients, in less than 2 hours. So we offer a white glove service that will allow you to install it. We will get you set up with out-of-the-box reports and alerts in your environment. And then keep in mind that embedded intelligence and automation that Yemi showed you, that I spoke about, it really serves as if hiring 2 to 3 full-time troubleshooting experts. So it doesn't take a lot of time to set this up. It's embedded in the product. It will automatically start working, and you can start leveraging it day one. As you start to understand some of the metrics, we have that built-in intelligence where you can actually understand and see what is some of the documentation, what do these metrics mean, and most importantly, we offer you your troubleshooting workflow, so you identify how to use this data in your troubleshooting scenario. So with that, Yemi, let's go ahead and jump into questions. The first comes from Helena, and she asks, for your application availability monitor, how is it deployed at each location?
So for the application availability monitor, there is a, typically, it's deployed on a VM or a laptop or, a workstation or something like that at those different locations. We have customers that have, maybe server blades that they were about to decommission or laptops that they were about to decommission, or of course, like for instance, in the airline example, these were deployed in AWS or Azure. But it's a really lightweight piece of technology that once it's installed on that endpoint machine, all of the management and configuration and scheduling launches, those are all done centrally from the from the console that is deployed in your data center.
Great. Thank you, Yemi. Justin has the next question. How are you different from Citrix Director?
That is a great question. I know we get that a lot, pretty much on almost every webinar. So we actually have a slide here that sort of breaks it down further. And I think that you can sort of talk about it in about 2 ways, right? So if we look on the screen here, if you look in the middle of this slide on the components that aren't red, these are components that that Director or any other sort of free tools are going to be able to monitor. These are tools that are created to monitor the components, the core components. But of course, we know that there are a lot more components and different variables that go into delivering a better or a good user experience. So the difference between Goliath and some of these tools is that Goliath is going to look and monitor all of the components that you see here on the screen, your endpoints, your EHR applications, there's back-end systems, your hypervisor platform, even giving you insight into the user devices and the user's connection speed as they're connecting into the environment. So you really have what we call end-to-end visibility. Next thing also is historical data and leveraging these deep metrics for documentation so that you can put in place permanent fix actions, ultimately giving you the ability to transform yourself from being sort of reactive to being proactive, and also stopping or putting an end to issues from reoccurring in the environment moving forward. Hopefully that's able to give you a couple, some insight there into the differences between Goliath and some of the other tools.
Great. Yemi, we have another question from Razi, and he asks, how are you pulling the data for troubleshooting? Do agents need installed on every machine?
That's a good question as well. That's something that we do hear a lot. We get a lot, which is, the answer to that question is we collect information a number of different ways. First of all, we leverage API integration into Citrix, VMware, as well as sort of the popular hypervisor platforms. So we are sort of leveraging agentless communication methods to pull in a lot of data. However, we do also have a lightweight intelligent agent. It's about 1.5 MB in size. It doesn't require a reboot on installation, and we leverage that through our integration with the protocols and things like that to be able to get those deeper metrics into the user experience, their connectivity, so on and so forth.
Great. Razi says thank you. Next question comes from Troy. What metrics do you offer to troubleshoot slow logons?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think, and I can jump into the technology, might be able to give some additional sort of insights there. When it comes to logon duration, I think that, what you'll notice is that our technology is really unique in the amount of data that we collect within that process. So if we flip over to the logon duration tab for this session, you can see here that this page is broken down into 2 sections. You have the top section, it's going to break down what's happening during the brokering stages of the logon process. So what's happening at the delivery controller, things like drive mapping, logon scripts, printer mapping, profile load times, and things like that. But you can also see what's happening at Citrix Receiver or Workspace app. And this is without having to deploy any technology to the endpoint machine itself. We're able to see things like ICA file download or how long it took to establish the micro VPN connection. If there are any receiver startup processes that are taking a longer time to execute while this user is logging in. And then at the bottom of the screen, you're able to break down everything happening at the session host, and as well any of the additional components that contribute to the logon. So for instance, if I expand authentication, I can now see the user, what OUs this user is a part of, what domain controller was in charge of authenticating the session. I can also see how long it took for those LDAP calls to take place. I can expand the group policy section where I can see the different GPOs that actually affected this user session. Now, this is our lab environment, so there's really not much going on here. What I'm actually going to do is pull up a quick slide that could give you additional insight here that to hopefully answer the question completely. This slide is what we got from an actual customer environment, and you can see here a long logon time, expanding the group policy section, being able to see each individual group policy that affected the user session down to a policy name and how long each one of them is taking to execute, so that you can quickly isolate the root cause of the slowness, drill into it and solve it, as opposed to spending your time looking through different tools and consoles to be able to find what those issues were. Hopefully that's able to answer the question there.
Great. Thanks, Yemi. Joyce asks, if we have two data centers, will the reports combine from both sides, or will they be independent reports?
Oh, for our reporting, you can decide on how you would like that to be sent out. We have customers that, we have MSP customers that are monitoring many different environments, customer environments from a single console, and they give sort of reports out based on the infrastructure or based on the components that are specific to that customer. So if you would like to see your reports aggregated together for both your data centers, that is something that is available. Of course, if you wanted to segment that based on data centers or even based on individual components, groups, machine catalogs, things like that, you can do that in the technology leveraging the reports as well.
All right, and we have one more question coming from Razi, so if there's any other questions, please do submit. And he asks, what third parties do you have out-of-the-box integration with?
So we actually, when it comes to integration, we integrate with a number of different tools. Whether that is, of course, we talked about Power BI and things like that, but we also can send up our alerts because we talked about embedded intelligence and automation. We can send up our alerts to any other sort of ITSM tools. So for instance, ServiceNow or, MoveSoft and things like that. A lot of our customers leverage sort of our alerting capabilities with their existing tools as well. So we definitely integrate with a number of different tools.
Well, thank you, Yemi. That wraps up all the questions. I appreciate the time from you today, and I appreciate the time from everyone that stayed on the line. As you can see, if you're interested, we do offer 30-day free trials. So please go ahead and email techinfo@goliathtechnologies.com. Or if you'd like to set up a custom demo or have custom questions, please email that email address and we're happy to get to you. When you close out, you will get a short survey. Please take 30 seconds to complete it. We're often looking for feedback around our webinar series so that we are constantly providing you relevant information and we can continually improve and make sure that we're meeting the needs of our community. Thank you, and I hope everyone has a great day.